Hi, my name is Ariel from the Children of Karma, and today I'd like to discuss Sun and Mars aspects. The Sun is our life giver, our source, our spirit, our fire. It's tied to our identity, our career, and our purpose, our daimon. It's like that fire within, and our reason for being. It's also tied to the Father as well. So if you have Mars in aspect to the Sun, then the Father will have these Mars qualities. In a positive, he can show you independence. Mars is a very independent planet, and whether he does that directly or indirectly, sometimes the Father will show us through their mistakes what not to do. This can show that the Father and anger patterns with Mars, dominance, willpower. It can be that the Father was a bit of a bully. Whenever you try to express that Sun energy to radiate yourself and to just be, he's cutting you off at your knees. Mars is the cutter. So it's like it's cutting you down to size, or going deeply, hurting you deeply, cutting you deeply. It could be a bully, a manipulator. Say Mars is in the fourth house. The fourth house can represent father as well. So it can show even the household is just always fighting, so much hostility in the home. Mars could be selfish as well. They're focused on their own desires, so it falls back on you a little bit. That assertive energy, that Father is showing you how to be assertive, how to gain control in your life, how to have authority in your life and make your own decisions. And if he's too forceful, sometimes it can cause you to pull back, out of a fearfulness. The Mars, with this aspect, it's always aware of danger. Danger is at, every corner. I always have to be ready and prepared. This is the fighter, the protector energy. There's a higher expression of Mars as well. And Mars is exalted in Capricorn. So that shows that Mars does well with structure and boundaries. And if the father energy was not in the highest expression of Mars, then that falls back on the child. The child has to then first acknowledge what has happened, acknowledge the pattern, and then try to move away from it. The Sun in aspect to Mars, depending on where it is, you think about the conjunction, they're meeting, they're together, they're aligned almost, they're aligned, or in the conjunction, they could be fighting, like they can't see each other, they can't see that their own viewpoints. But as the Mars, Sun is the fastest moving planet out of these two. So the Sun is moving away. The Sun, the child, that identity of that child, it has to pull away from the Mars, pull away from those patterns of the father to be self. It has to move away from what it once was to become. It takes 2 years to return to that original place in the chart from where you started. So 2 years to go all around the chart, and Mars is cutting, severing, and going deep into every sign, every house of your chart, just to ultimately express your natal Mars, your true self, or your true assertive energy. It's in a cycle, even if you feel restricted by the father energy, just keep in mind that you also have access to the other side, to overcome. You can overcome now. Take the lessons of what was bad, and what will you do differently, and make the changes. Mars is severing, so you should be good at severing old patterns, severing this connection to the father identity. Maybe the father can't be responsible for your identity or your assertive energy, or how you exert that authority in your own life, how you make decisions in your own life, maybe even tied to what the father wants, and these are how you're making your decisions. The Mars cycle also reminds me of the 12 labors of Hercules, how Mars has to travel through the 12 signs. It takes 2 years to accomplish. Hercules had these 12 trials, and in one of the trials, the Lernaean Hydra, he's faced with this 9-headed snake, and he has to learn how to defeat this snake. Hercules, his weapon of choice was always the club, so he bludgeoned one of the heads of the snake, and then 9 more sprouted from this. And then he realized that, well, overt aggression actually can make the problem worse. So you have to learn how to maneuver here. Mars also, its home is Aries, but also Scorpio, the water sign, the feminine. So Mars has a feminine expression. It has a watery expression as well. It knows how to move in ways that are beneficial, but a little more covert. You know, this story about the Lernaean Hydra to me is just very covert. How Hercules has to now, in a way, manipulate in order to get that snake from the cave out, you know, into the sunlight, lifting it up into the sun, because it's the sunlight that actually kills the snake. So he has to now lure this snake out through these kind of covert tactics. But through these covert tactics, in a way, he starts to see the monster. And this is what's necessary in this process, even with anger. It represents anger. You know, overt anger can make the situation worse. Sometimes we have to maneuver in smarter ways. And it can appear manipulative too, because the Mars wants to be direct, you know, and say it directly, like, look, I don't like you. It's at home in Scorpio, so it knows how to move subtly as well. It knows how to do things through the undercurrents, you know. It wants to lure the monster out, but also Hercules begins to see the monster himself as well throughout this process. I think they're both revealed to each other. It's like the shadow side versus our side here, trying to meet each other in understanding, to see each other. It's as he lures this monster out using fire, you know, he lures the monster out of the cave, and then he lifts the monster up to the sun, the sunlight, truth, illumination. It warms that demon heart, you know, it warms that monster, and then that monster is gone. This story shows that as long as you're willing to see that monster, see them, see their hurt, acknowledge it, you know, sometimes that's all that's needed, is just to see the monster. And then the intensity of that exchange starts to lessen. And you can really see with clarity that really just sometimes people just want to be seen, and not necessarily even finding a solution. You know, sometimes that Mars, it wants to find the solution for things. It's the doer, but sometimes just seeing the sun, you know, making it visible, illuminating that monster and bringing it to the light, showing the truth of it, sometimes is enough just to get rid of that monster. It's a bit of a dance. The shadow is always there. You're always aware of it. The Mars looks at what is hidden. So there's no escaping that shadow. It's just learning how to work with it, learning how to dance with your shadow. You know, every morning I dance with my shadow. It's like when you have a lot of pain, it's like as soon as you wake up, the weight is just on your neck, on your shoulders. And just every morning, you know, without fail, it's always there. So I learn how to work with that monster, you know. Okay, well, you want some oracle cards? Okay. You want some meditation with crystals? Okay. You know, I give that monster a little bit of what it needs to feel seen. I see you. I know you're in pain. It's okay. And I've got a solution for you. You know, come here. It's going to be okay. And just learn how to work with that anger just to reduce it. Also, I've noticed just creation and comedy, these are two lanes. Comedy is sometimes the It depends. You know, some people have more access to that creative side and they can, you know, tune into it right away. And just if they're upset, they can release it through a drawing or some sort of creative element like singing or dancing. And comedy as well. I mean, making a parody of certain things, you know, sometimes the intensity of that anger is actually pretty funny. You know, it's just funny later on. If you can make a parody of it, make it exaggerated, um, make it funnier, you know, lean towards the humor, that will instantly get rid of that intensity of that anger. It's just trying to lean on Apollo, even leaning on Apollo, creation um and laughter. Of course, Mars gets a lot of negativity, you know, like it's a bad planet, but um it's necessary. It depends on your situation. I think the Mars energy really helps if you're going through physical illness, physical injuries. It really helps if you're going through addiction, any type of like long-term crisis. You need that Mars. That Mars is the will to live, you know, and the sun is the life giver. So this person has a will, a fighter spirit. You know, they can handle things like chronic pain. For example, they can generate the willpower to keep going. That dominance can be used positively if it has a good container, you know, a cause, more importantly than a person. You know, don't fight people, fight causes. You know, this aspect can be very good, actually, that the martyrdom, sometimes you can have that because it's tied to the sun. You can feel like you want to save people. Mars is that motivator, that mover, that go-getter. Sometimes it can be difficult. Maybe you run into somebody who doesn't have this energy, or you're trying to help and they just don't. They're not receiving it in your way. This is another thing with that authoritative energy of the father. Sometimes it doesn't accept people the way that they are. And even if we may feel that we're not like that, we may carry some of those patterns from the father. And even the father, I mean, which father are they talking about with the sun? With the sun, Saturn can be grandfathers as well. But I feel like, you know, the sun is probably all fathers, probably all the fathers down the line. It probably says something about them all, particularly if you look at the houses. You know, look at all those details and look at the family line. It could be something that exists beyond your father. That's why it's hard to just blame the one parent, you know, because it exists even within that parent. That parent was once a child with this pattern, and maybe they just didn't learn how to work with it. You know, they didn't get the awareness. They didn't learn how to master this aspect, this planetary energy. So they pass these lessons on down to the child, and it just cements over time. It's difficult to be that Mars, to stand apart. It's difficult, especially because you're going to be dealing with a lot of opposition. That Mars tied to the sun, it's like people are attacking my identity, they're attacking my career, they're attacking my sense of self, you know, my very core, my being, they're attacking me. So it can feel like that. It can feel like you're on your own. But this aspect is meant to motivate. And sometimes we motivate by being, right? Just people just see you being and doing and succeeding. You empower others just through being. So I think focus on those positive aspects of this. You know, the father can hold you back, but eventually, you know, the son defeats the father. You know, he overtakes that and he becomes that power position. You will have your time. And when you do have that time, you have the power now to behave differently in this space. You know, how will you lead? Will you give grace to those who don't deserve it? You know, look at the opposite planet of Mars, which is the ruler Venus. Um, how will you interact with others? How will you show grace and beauty now that you're in that power position? Or will you continue that cycle and repeat it and cut down your child too? You know, it's about the awareness, and then what do we do with it that is beneficial, that I think we should pull from the astrology. Sometimes we lose sight of the fact that we can move within these spectrums of energy, and maybe it just takes a little bit of awareness about, you know, how to call to those symbols. What do they mean, and how do I incorporate them in practical ways in my everyday life? And that's something I would just love if we could live with just a little more intention. I think it just comes from like nearly losing my life. You know, when you do get close to death, or you have a brush with death in some way, it makes you question the meaning in your life, the meaning of life in general, and maybe, hopefully, it can encourage you to live life with more meaning, you know, meaning in every little thing. Thank you for joining me for this video, and I'd love to see you at thechildrenofkarma.com so we can find your ancestral patterns. Don't forget to like the video. Bye.